All right, Open Texas and Texans and Americans against contact tracing. I want to welcome our wonderful guest. Welcome back. Actually, she was speaking to us a few weeks ago. Just about seems 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was just a fantastic. I'd call it a bombshell interview. Frankly, I know that that's not how she thinks at all. She's just very objective. We love that about her, but I felt what she shared was absolutely amazing. So very excited. I don't want to introduce all the things about her as we shared last time, but she is a nationally known physician. It's Dr. Elizabeth Lee Bleat. She's been on Fox and Friends, all sorts of shows, and we're just honored to have her here today. So welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Grant. It's really a pleasure to be back with you.
Okay, so we're going to cover a couple of topics, and then I'm just going to let Dr. Vliet share what's on our heart too. But let's talk about first the continued Texas war on HCQ and kind of what's going on. We're getting some. You're going to be in the know more than we are because we've seen various things. We had your interview that talked about some of the things that were being stopped with HCQ. And then Dr. Yvette, we haven't had her on here, but she shared some stuff that seemed to be helping. But after I talked with you a couple of days ago, I learned that wasn't necessarily all the case as far as Texas, the pharmacy board and some other folks are still not responding well. So can you tell us about kind of what is the Texas Medical Board doing? What are they doing or the pharmacy boards?
We still have a problem with the Texas Medical Board threatening doctors with investigations for prescribing hydroxychloroquine, which is unprecedented. It's an FDA-approved medication. We're perfectly within our legal rights and the FDA regulations to prescribe it off-label for COVID-19 treatment, whether the doctor decides it could be helpful for prophylaxis in a high-risk patient or whether it would be for early onset symptoms to prevent hospitalization as much as possible by starting early, or used in the hospital, which is what has been allowed, and to use it in nursing homes is restricted as well. So we do have doctors that have investigations opened by the medical board pursuing them for using their legal off-label prescribing for hydroxychloroquine for Texas patients. And I just tried to get prescriptions for 2 of my Dallas patients just 2 days ago from a pharmacy in Florida that is able to dispense across the country. They're licensed to do so. And because I couldn't get it from the pharmacies in the Dallas area, they were restricting it because these patients did not have a positive test and it was for COVID and they were not in the hospital. They had no right to restrict that. So then when I went to work with the pharmacy in Florida that is legally able to dispense to people in other states, they would not dispense it to someone in Texas because of the Texas restrictions. So we still have, now these 2 patients of mine were high risk based on age and medical conditions. They also were involved in going into a nursing home as a part-time family caregiver for a relative. And so they are high risk, and my goal was to use it prophylactically for them, which other countries are doing very successfully, and to help them avoid getting sick and infecting other people. They also have a profession where they're in contact with a lot of people. So for many reasons, these people needed the medication. And it is still restricted in Texas, no matter what press and public relations stunt was done that the pharmacy board backed off. They really have not. And the medical board definitely has not. And we are looking at whether or not after the FDA suit, whether there will be another suit against the Texas Medical Board. Our organization has already sued and won against the Texas Medical Board for abuse of due process and abuse of other issues in the practice of medicine. And we won those cases. Our lawyer for AAPS, Andy Schlafly, is extraordinarily good, very thorough in his background documentation of the legal grounds for the suits. And we did win that one, and we probably would win another one. It's just costly and time to do it, and it's costing lives and the safety of people if we can't get the medication.
Wow. Okay. So there's been a recent, I know you know all this, but there's been a recent restart of the HCQ testing at the federal level. So apparently the study was debunked that said that HCQ was dangerous a couple weeks ago. And it sounded like just based on absolutely worthless information, almost fabricated.
Are you talking about a study that was just retracted?
Yes, the new study that was just requested, it sounded like it started back up again because the study that was discrediting HCQ at the federal level was then was shown to be, I guess it was debunked. It was shown to be flawed.
Well, Grant, it's really important that we get specific about which study. There
Yes,
are
please.
dozens of studies going on right now, so we need to be specific.
Yes.
The Lancet study that was published in the Lancet, which is a British medical journal, was a data mining study, supposedly, with hospitals in multiple countries, multiple hospitals, and supposedly, I say supposedly and hesitate because they claimed it was 96,000 patients, but they excluded 80,000 of them, and we don't know why. And the rest that remained were highly questionable because hospitals started coming out and scientists in other countries started very quickly coming out questioning the Lancet study, saying, we can't make sense of the data. Nobody asked our hospital to access our data. Where did you get it? And what are you using? And then Surgisphere, the company that supposedly had conducted the study, would not release any information about how they had obtained this questionable data. That we now had 180 scientists and physicians in different countries signing on to the petition saying, we question this, we don't think this is valid. Ultimately, there was so much furor generated, and Surgisphere would not release the data, and there were questions about whether this company even really was more than a shell company. So there were so many questions about the data and the company and who the authors were and what was going on and how they got the information, that the Lancet just retracted the study altogether. That's unusual. It happens in medicine and in medical publications. It's unusual, but it's good that they did, because there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this may well have been just a fabricated study designed to discredit hydroxychloroquine, which we've been seeing all along, that there's an orchestrated campaign of focusing on negative information or designing studies that are designed to fail. The one that the LA Times, the Washington Post, and New York Times promoted heavily was one from the Amazon region in Brazil. And that one was so egregiously, seriously flawed. It was dangerous. The study used double the lethal dose of chloroquine in elderly patients that were highly selected to be the most critically ill. There were ethical violations. There were dose guideline violations. I mean, they used 12.5 grams of chloroquine when 5 grams is known to be the lethal dose. And the treatment dose of certainly hydroxychloroquine is usually no more than 400 milligrams a day, which is 0.4 of a gram. So it was a grossly flawed study and dangerous. In fact, Brazilian scientists wrote letters of objection to the journal that had published it, to the newspapers that had published it. And the Brazil government is actually looking into, they are conducting a judicial investigation, an ethical and legal investigation into what took place. So, but that's what was promoted in our country to say that it's dangerous. It wasn't the drug that was dangerous, it was the gross negligent medical practice that was dangerous. And so
Dr.
that's part.
Dr. Valid, okay, that brings up another question. This Cambridge modeling that happened in, I guess, early March, that kind of set the alarm for everybody in Great Britain about the possible dangers of the coronavirus, and that's been disproven too. So, is it typical for the U.S. to use studies from not even that are regulated by the U.S. to dictate policy? Is that?
Well, it's not usual, Grant, but keep in mind, in late January, the world was being lied to by the World Health Organization, who claimed there was not human to human transmission, when the Chinese government clearly knew there was, and they knew that people were dying with exposure to other people. And so countries were being misled by China and the World Health Organization. And if you have garbage data going into a computer model, you're going to have garbage coming out. So at the time that was done, no one had reliable information. We began keeping our own data. Each country began keeping their own. And then there's a website called the Worldometer that keeps track of what all of the countries are reporting.
Yeah.
And as we began to accumulate individual country data, we began seeing that it was not the worst case that was presented by that Imperial College study. So I think that to look at what our leaders were dealing with at the time, they were dealing with flagrant lies from the Chinese government and the World Health Organization about the seriousness of the virus. They did not have good information to make policy decisions. So that said, I do think that the lockdown has gone on far too long. I think there are many scientists and infectious disease physicians speaking out that we really do need to start opening up, and we need to start having people mingling and developing the herd immunity, which is a better form of immunity to be developing than to try and come up with a vaccine. But we're dealing with an RNA virus. Those vaccines are very hard to develop, and we still don't have one for the SARS virus, that COVID-1 that came out in 2002, also from China. So the concerns about getting people to have a treatment medicine early, which hydroxychloroquine has clearly been shown in multiple countries, different age groups, different ethnic groups, different demographics in the countries, different conditions in the countries. It's been shown to be effective for preventing the COVID. India and many other countries are using it for prophylaxis for their doctors and nurses and first responders. For example, just last weekend, the federal government in the United States sent 2 million doses of hydroxychloroquine from our national stockpile that was supposed to be available for Americans' outpatient treatment in nursing homes, but was restricted to hospitals. And so it's sitting in a warehouse rotting. It deteriorates over time, particularly as conditions get warmer. And so our government is sending 2 million doses to the government of Brazil for their doctors and nurses and first responders to use prophylactically. And yet our doctors and nurses and our high-risk people working in nursing homes and first responders and high-risk elderly are prevented by our FDA from having access to it for prophylaxis and for early treatment, which is when it works.
That's pretty outrageous and concerning. Is it I'm assuming it's not the FDA that authorized that 2 million shipment?
I can't personally speak to who authorized it.
Yeah,
I doubt that it was the FDA. I
yeah.
suspect it was those who are in charge of the strategic stockpile and logistics and medical supplies and humanitarian aid, which would be a different agency. But let me say this, the fact that this is so flagrantly discriminatory and a violation of protections under the Affordable Care Act that Obama passed in and the Democrats passed in 2010. And it's a flagrant violation of the equal protection clauses under the Constitution.
Mm.
Those are the reasons that our medical organization, the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, led by our attorney, General Counsel Andy Schlafly, have filed suit on June 2nd against the FDA, and the suit is demanding an emergency release of the restriction to hospitalized patients so that doctors across the United States can use their medical judgment to prescribe it in nursing homes, outpatients, and can also prescribe it if they think it's appropriate for a patient and the patient wants to do it as an off-label prescription. We can prescribe it prophylactically, which is a once a week dose. 400 milligrams is once a week is what India is using and some of the other countries for prophylaxis. And then the treatment course is only 400 milligrams a day with zinc and azithromycin and vitamin C. But for the hydroxychloroquine, it's only 400 milligrams a day for 5 to 7 days. It's not like the long duration of years of daily higher dose that's used for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis that you have to be concerned about retinopathy, which is damage to the eye. That typically occurs. And I've talked with multiple people who are ophthalmologists and optometrists. In fact, one of my patients is an optometrist who's written a medical publication on hydroxychloroquine and eye damage. And she sent me her paper. And that tends to happen only after 5 years of daily use at very high doses. And it's a rare side effect, but you do have to monitor for that. The cardiac arrhythmias that the media is harping on, the FDA had 62 cardiac deaths out of 50 million prescriptions, which is a risk of 1.2 per million. And your risk of dying in a car accident on a 1,000-mile road trip is 1 in 74,000. So 10 times greater risk of dying from a fatal car accident on a 1,000-mile road trip than if you took hydroxychloroquine for years for lupus or rheumatoid. And we're only talking about taking it for 5 to 7 days. So
That's crazy.
The way that the risk has been so exaggerated in a coordinated, almost word by word description from one network to another, one media outlet to another. It's like they're all reading from the same script designed to prevent people from having access to a safe medicine to treat early and get back to work safely. Bottom line.
Dr. Vliet, I'm quite shocked at the discrimination against hydroxychloroquine, and I've never heard of this. I'm not a pharmacist or a doctor or physician like you, but I've never heard about this. Has this happened for any other FDA-approved drug?
Not in the course of for my medical career.
Wow.
And over the course, and that is what I'm hearing from doctors around the country on the conference calls that I've been part of over the last couple of months. No one has seen a orchestrated attack on a drug that has a 65-year history of safe use around the world
Mm.
in all age groups and in pregnant women and nursing mothers. It is unconscionable that we have lost as many lives as we have had, and doctors' hands were tied to prevent them from using their judgment to decide to try hydroxychloroquine early.
Mm.
When I say hydroxychloroquine, I want to clarify the
Yes.
protocols that have been used effectively include azithromycin, which in this case is not acting so much as an antibiotic to kill bacteria, because COVID is a viral disease. It's acting as an anti-inflammatory
Mm.
and an antiviral. It has antiviral activity, which they have shown going back a number of years. There are studies to show that it actually has some antiviral activity. So the protocol that works is a combination of vitamin C and zinc and azithromycin and hydroxychloroquine. But I'm talking specifically focused on hydroxychloroquine because that's the only one that's restricted. And
Mm.
that's the critical component of this protocol for early treatment because it blocks the virus from attaching to the surface of the cell at the ACE2 receptor, which is the receptor the virus is using to get into the cell. It's the first step in the
Mm.
infection.
Okay.
It's kind of like I said before on your open Texas. It's like a lock keeping a burglar out of your house.
Mm.
Well, it's hard for the burglar to get in by putting a lock on your door, and the ACE2 receptor is the lock that the virus uses to enter the cell. So if hydroxychloroquine is present, then it acts as a lock and the virus can't use that opening to get in the cell. So that's first step. Second step is that hydroxychloroquine specifically acts as a carrier of zinc to get across the cell membrane, the zinc ion. And so by carrying zinc ion across the cell membrane into the center where the virus is using our cellular machinery to duplicate itself, the hydroxychloroquine and zinc together block the virus from multiplying. So people don't get so sick. They don't have such an overload of viruses and they don't spread it to other people. So that's why it's so critical that it be used early or prophylactically. And our studies at the CDC and NIH, going back to 2002 to 2003, clearly showed that was how chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine worked. They knew that then, that it was a potent antiviral medicine, even though it had originally been approved for an anti-parasite effect in malaria, and then it was approved as an immune suppressant in lupus and rheumatoid. It also has antiviral effects. Now, here's something else interesting in all my research on hydroxychloroquine. It's also been used in the past to treat diabetes because it lowers blood sugar.
Oh, wow.
Then we developed better medicines for diabetes, so it never was. They never sought approval for it for that. And it's also in clinical trials now as an anti-cancer drug.
Oh,
So
my goodness.
this medicine has incredible variety of beneficial effects in our bodies. And our CDC and NIH have known that for at least 15 years and longer on some of the other effects. So to see what's happening now to demonize this drug, to call it so dangerous. Why is it dangerous to treat it for COVID 5 days? And yet it's not dangerous to treat lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and malaria every day, day in and day out for years.
Good point.
It's unprecedented.
Okay. Dr. Vliet, you brought up something incredible, and I want you to share it with our users. When we were talking about what to talk about on the interview, you really brought it home to me, and I didn't get it at first, so I thank you for it. So listen, Open Texas and TAC, you need to hear this point really, really carefully, what she's about to say. Um, the reason that hydroxychloroquine is important, it's not just to knock out COVID, but it's also connected to knocking out contact tracing. That's huge. Doctor, can you talk about that?
Well, my point to you, Grant, was that if we were using hydroxychloroquine, as India is the best example because they have put it on their government website, the India Council for Medical Research has posted their guidelines. Any of your listeners can go look at it. India is the best model of all the countries in the world, and they were the earliest to come up with this approach. In using it prophylactically in all the high risk patients, first responders, doctors and nurses, family members of exposed people in nursing homes, they are reducing the spread of the virus. In treating early with the daily dosing versus the weekly dosing for prophylaxis, they are preventing spread by asymptomatic people or by people who have early symptoms and before their test results might come back positive or before there's been a test available. So they're treating it early, which stops the virus from multiplying, stops the viral shedding, stops the spread. If you have those two medication options, approaches, available to the public and to doctors to use freely, we don't have the need for tracing every person that you've had contact with because we can knock it out early. They're doing that in India. And it's 4 times the population of the United States, much denser cities, much more poverty, much less of the public health and hygiene infrastructure compared to us, much less medical facilities compared to us. India is doing that very successfully, and my editorials show the data charts about how much lower the caseload is in India, the death rate is. India was still standing at 2 or 4 deaths per million. At the time, we were over 300 deaths per million.
Mm.
And because they are doing this. So the idea that we have to trace every single contact that every single person has had is, to me, an outrageous invasion of privacy, number one. And number two, it's almost an impossible task. And it would be a waste of money if we would just let doctors be doctors, let the patients have access to it. In fact, that ties into the latest push that I've been spearheading, which is making hydroxychloroquine over the counter. It is safer than, in terms of the actual risk of the drug, there's less risk of a serious complication from hydroxychloroquine than with Tylenol or NSAIDs or proton pump inhibitors to reduce stomach acid. And I put that in my last editorial. Tylenol, acetaminophen overdose, is the leading cause. And I'm not talking about suicide. I'm talking about people who accidentally take too much and develop acetaminophen-induced liver toxicity. That is the number one cause of hepatitis in the United States and liver failure in the United States, compared to the viral hepatitis illnesses and other forms of hepatitis. And it is the second leading cause of liver failure leading to a liver transplant. That's huge in terms of the risk. And people don't think twice about popping multiple Tylenol a day. We're only talking about 2 hydroxychloroquine pills a day. They haven't been associated with anything like that level of severity. Aleve and Advil, for example, have a very high risk of inducing kidney failure, and they also account for 21% of all the adverse drug effects in the United States. Then if we look at the acid reducers in the proton pump inhibitor category, like Nexium, for example, you're looking at over 20% risk of spine or hip fracture because they impair calcium absorption and cause bone loss. So people are taking excessive doses of those medicines on their own every day and don't think twice about it. And hydroxychloroquine has a better safety profile. The pharmacist and I, who prepared the proposal to submit to President Trump, and I don't know whether he's seen it because we sent it Memorial Day weekend, and then all hell broke loose with all the riots around the country. And obviously the president has had his hands full with many, many things. But we were able to go back to 1982 studying the safety of hydroxychloroquine and look at the comparison safety data between these other existing over-the-counter medicines and hydroxychloroquine. It's really staggering. The safety profile of hydroxychloroquine is that good, and the ones we are already using that the FDA issues warnings about regularly, that they have so much risk, and yet they're over the counter. So we need grassroots support behind the effort, calling the president switchboard at the White House, tweeting the president, put the access in the hands of patients. If you do that, then, and we can easily design, the pharmacist and I, in the proposal, put in some solutions to help improve the safety profile. I mean, it'd be easy enough for a pharmaceutical manufacturer to simply package the hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and zinc in a dose pack for a week, which is a COVID treatment. That would be easy enough to do. And then you're not dealing with the issues of hoarding on the one side, and you're not dealing with people gobbling a bunch of pills thinking that if one works or two works, then 10 are better, because that's obviously not safe. It's not safe with Tylenol. It's not safe with aspirin. So there's a way to do it that's rational and safe and looks out for the public interest and is medically credible, but put the control in people's hands. If you did that, we wouldn't need all this contact tracing. We wouldn't need the restrictions at the pharmacy. People would still consult their doctors. They'd still get tested. People would want to know what disease they're treating for the most part. They would go and work with their doctors. I think most responsible people would. And then we would have much better safety. But why couldn't we be using hydroxychloroquine prophylactically for all the food processing plant workers like they do in India, and help the workers in our food processing plants stay safe going back to work to maintain the food supply?
Great question.
Nobody's really talked about that, but that is one of the reasons I keep harping on the fact that it's safer to open businesses if you use the medicine that we know is working prophylactically in early treatment in other countries, and stop trying to politicize and demonize it because they're trying to shift the outcome of the November election and trying to get President Trump out of office. Put the interest of the patients first. Put medicine in the hand of doctors, not politicians. Do that first. Let's get people back to work. Let's get people an option that can help them stay safer, help them relieve their anxiety. If I know I have a treatment for the flu like Tamiflu, I take it on a trip and I don't worry about flying during flu season. If I have, and I do, I travel with it. I travel with antibiotics. I travel with Tamiflu. I travel with other antivirals, and I travel with a variety of medicine that is designed to treat the first sign of illness if I get sick, and then I travel and go to work and don't worry about it. The same would be true here if people could have that peace of mind and that psychological relief of anxiety by knowing that either I can get it on my own or my doctor is free to get it, instead of having the governors and the medical boards and the FDA and all of these politicians and bureaucrats interfering with our right to preserve our life and our liberty to go about our work and daily life.
Okay. Okay, just one clarification. The lawsuit, I read it, and forgive me, I didn't remember this one point. The lawsuit didn't is not saying, hey, let's make hydroxychloroquine over the counter. It's just saying remove the restrictions. But
Correct.
your request to President Trump is saying, hey, yes, it would be great if you could make it over the counter.
Well, the medical proposal that the pharmacist and I wrote together over Memorial Day weekend, we worked our butts off for 10, 12 hours a day getting this.
I know you were supposed to be having fun.
well, saving lives is more important than having fun. I can have
Yep.
fun later.
Yep.
Excuse me. But anyway, we really did a very thorough job of looking at the research over the past decades, looking at the world outcome studies, comparing death rates, comparing toxicities. I have given that proposal to Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, who is chairman of the Senate Oversight Committee on Government Affairs. So the FDA comes under his jurisdiction. He's also, the Senate Oversight Committee that he chairs also includes Homeland Security. Well, this is a national security issue too. If we can't get our country back to work and stabilized, keep our military and first responders and doctors and nurses safe from the virus, then that's a national security issue as well. So Senator Johnson has taken it forward. He has gotten it in the hands of Mark Meadows and in the hands of Peter Navarro, according to my discussions with him. And I have another colleague who's a physician who has also gotten a proposal to Mark Meadows, the president's chief of staff. I have personally sent it to Dr. Paul Teller, who is the deputy special assistant to President Trump and the assistant to Vice President Pence for strategic affairs. I don't know for a fact whether anyone has shown the document to President Trump or Vice President Pence. That's why I think all of the Open Texas people and all of your TAC people need to start a massive Twitter storm to President Trump. Go to my Twitter feed and get the tweets from the media section about making hydroxychloroquine over the counter, free the restrictions, and promote the FDA lawsuit and the over the counter campaign. We're calling it America Out Loud, Malcolm Out Loud. America Out Loud website is spearheading this with in terms of the marketing out to the social media. And so we are calling the hashtag Get Loud on HCQ. And
I like it.
So Open Texas, Get Loud on HCQ, HCQ Freedom. If your members and your followers on Facebook and Twitter would start pushing those hashtags and that message and tag the president, the vice president, Senator Johnson, Mark Meadows, Peter Navarro, anybody you can think of who can make a decision on that.
We will. Okay, we're going to have some homework. We'll work on it together, and then we'll send it out to the group. That's an issue that's dear to us, so don't worry. We'll give you some firepower on that.
Let Texas lead the way, Grant.
Yes,
get rid of your restrictions. Have the Texas people lead the way in this fight for freedom. Remember the Alamo.
Oh yes. Well, we're working on it. Thank you. That's a good word. Okay, I just had one more question, and then feel free to share anything else. But we talked a little bit about it. But I keep seeing this. It just is so concerning when your common sense that you're sharing about HCQ would solve so many of our problems. And yet I keep seeing about the vaccine being pushed, the vaccine by the end of the year. Dr. Fauci is saying by the end of the year, we're going to have a vaccine. He even admitted, hey, we don't even know if it's going to work, but we're going to have it. What would you say to that?
Well, I think there are serious risks to public health when you rush a vaccine to market. Moderna is not doing, they got permission to bypass the animal testing step. Normally it takes years to develop a good vaccine. I'm very concerned about the rush to market on a vaccine. And vaccines have limits. And with flu vaccine, they're not a vaccine for all types of flu. We already know that. So it's limited in its immunity. And with an RNA virus, there has already been shown to be serious risk of giving an RNA virus vaccine, that if people are re-exposed to the virus, they actually get much sicker and are at higher risk of dying if they're re-exposed. I think there are many dangers in this, and I'm not in favor of rushing to market. I'm not in favor of massive vaccinations until we have a better idea of the safety and effectiveness of it. And what is this RNA virus doing to our own RNA? We need a lot of questions answered. But remember, part of what's driving this push is that there are billions and billions of dollars to be made on vaccines. China benefits, the vaccine manufacturers benefits, the NIH and CDC. These are not really government agencies. They're not for profit. They're 501c3 entities that actually own some of these patents. So they stand to make money on patent royalties. And a lot of the public doesn't understand that, about exactly what kind of organizations they really are. We have a lot of conflicts, financial conflicts, in the NIH panel of experts that are making treatment recommendations. You can go on their website, you can look at the financial disclosures. It becomes obvious very quickly. 9 of them had financial ties to Gilead, who makes remdesivir. China has a stake in remdesivir, and BlackRock Financial Asset Management Group owns 8.5% roughly of Gilead. So there are a whole lot of parties that stand to make trillions of dollars. And I don't say that lightly, because remdesivir could be a $1 trillion drug if it gets approved and becomes the standard of care for COVID, when we have something that has already been used by countries around the world, that's already FDA approved, it's cheap, it's off patent. I can get a bottle of 100 pills for $30. And I can treat with 100 pills, a 1-week course, let's say maximum 20 pills per patient. That's 5 patients for $30.
That's terrific. Okay, good information. Hey, all my questions are answered. Do you want to leave us with anything else?
I just want to encourage your listeners to get active on social media. Mm-hmm. We have got to make noise for the safety and lives and businesses and livelihoods of American citizens. And if we want our freedom and liberty, we have got to start making more noise about these options that do not involve mandatory vaccines, widespread vaccines, do not involve contact tracing, and do not involve prolonged lockdowns.
Okay.
So we get loud and speak up and start contacting legislators, the governor of Texas, lieutenant governor of Texas, the attorney general, file complaints about the fact that their doctors are being restricted. Patients have the right under the Texas Medical Board or Texas Insurance Board or the Texas Attorney General's office. Patients have the right to go and file complaints. My doctor is being restricted from getting a medicine that my doctor thinks would help me preserve my life, and I'm filing a complaint on it. Go file complaints. Get busy. Don't just sit and complain.
That's great info. Thank you again for being with us. And listen, after this is done, we're going to make this available so that it can be shared. And we anticipate it will be shared to thousands. We want it to go viral. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Grant. Really enjoyed being with you.
Okay. Open Texas and TAC. Bye for now. Talk to you soon.